Take a person, take a story, take you on a journey. It's your take.
A very warm welcome. I'm your host, James Ewen. Thanks for watching Your Take, the interview show, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. On today's Your Take, I'm joined by an actress, presenter and singer who shares her life story. My guest is the daughter of Sylvia Anderson, the creative mind who created classic children's television shows with her former husband, Gerry Anderson. These include Thunderbirds, Stingray, Fireball XL5, Joe 90, Captain Scarlett, and Space 1999. My guest did her acting training at East 15 Acting School in Essex. After graduation, she has gone on to work on stage and appear in TV dramas and feature films. Her television credits include The Bill, London's Burning, Midsomer Murders, Within These Walls, and the 1985 horror film Murder Elite, where she appeared alongside actress Ali MacGraw. My guest is a jazz singer and has released her own album called Love in a Dark Place. She also runs her own online lifestyle magazine called Glotime TV and co-hosts a YouTube interview show called The Wonderbirds with actresses Debbie Arnold, Sherrie Hewson, and Harriet Thorpe. On today's Your Take, I'm joined by Dee Anderson. We discussed Dee's time at drama school and a break into the acting world, her stage, television and film credits, her thoughts on her mother, and discussing the people she's worked with and interviewed for her Wonderbirds show. A very warm welcome, Dee. Thank you kindly for joining me today for Your Take.
Thank you for asking me, James.
There's a lot to discuss just from that introduction alone, and we'll obviously cover your acting career, predominantly in TV, and we'll obviously mention some of your feature film work as well. Your love of music, but particularly jazz. To begin with, I wanted to go very much back to the beginnings. You were born in Mississippi, USA.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you, Dee, what are your memories from your childhood? And can you give us a description of your parents, what they did for a living, and do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I was born in Mississippi, but I came over here very early. My mother was from London, and when she married Gerry, my stepfather, I was also very young. So Gerry was my stepfather, and he brought me up with my mother. They always were my mother was very creative. Gerry was more the business side of things and the hardware. You know, she was the sort of software, if you like, did all the sort of creating of the characters and the storylines. And she was a fantastic writer. She'd written a lot of stuff before she actually met Gerry. So he gave her all the creative stuff. And she was in an atmosphere of guys who were, you know, filmmakers. So they left her to do all the creative bits. And when Roberta Lee came along with the puppet series that they produced for her afterwards, after she didn't want any more series produced, my mother came up with the idea of bringing puppets to life and making them like Hollywood movies, because my mother was a complete Hollywood movie buff. And so when you think about all the sort of, you know, programs, they were very much sort of structured like movies.
I want to pick up on this creative background and obviously your mum and the huge influence upon yourself, but we'll talk specifically about your time in England, because you trained in performing arts at the East 15 Acting School in Essex.
Yes.
What made you decide to train and pursue a career in acting? And what do you think you learnt from your time at drama school?
Well, it was very interesting because I auditioned for RADA and East 15. And I thought either of those were schools that I wanted to go to. And I got into East 15. And I think because I was probably a little bit, I've always been a bit different. And so I think they picked up on that. And it was very much, I liked the whole, Joan Littlewood thing of Stratford East and the improvisation and the fact that I kind of understood it. I think because my grandfather and grandparents came from South London, not the East End, but it was a similar kind of background. And my grandfather was a boxer, so it was quite a tough kind of background. And although I was educated at a private school, so I came out sort of talking posh, whereas my grandparents were still very Cockney, and my mother was quite posh actually, because she'd kind of she made herself like that. She was self-taught and went to university, and was very intelligent and very, very successful and ambitious. So I got into East 15. When I went there, I've discovered that I had a very good singing voice, and I kind of knew that really already, but I didn't know how good it was. And I was told I could sing opera if I wanted, but I didn't like opera, so I didn't do it. And so I left drama school and I auditioned for Alan Parker, who's a legend. And at the time he had a fantastic office in Great Marlborough Street. And I auditioned for a movie. And when you're young and you just left drama school, you just think the world is your oyster, and you just think you're going to get every job you go for. So you do. So the first thing I do is go in and do this amazing audition. And he goes, "Oh my God, I wish I'd filmed it." In those days, they didn't video anything. There was no such thing as videos, really, especially, not like now you do self-tapes. So the film didn't happen, but he got me my equity card by giving me a commercial, because he used to produce commercials. And so that started me off. That got me off to a good start. And then I did a fantastic play for today called Diane in the late 70s. And that was with a brilliant director who was an award-winning director called Alan Clark. And that was a very, meaty role. And then I did a lot of theatre and television, and went on from there. And then I started singing again. And about 15 years ago, I started to record albums, and that's when I got very good reviews for that. And I've realized over the years that my passion now is music, and that's where I'm heading. And I'm doing gigs now, and I'm being mentored really by David and Carrie Grant, who are incredible. Do you know them, James?
I do, yeah. So far, we've established that you had this creative gene from a very early age.
Yes.
We've touched briefly on your mother, and we've also spoken about your time at drama school.
Yeah.
And you've also touched upon that period when you finished drama school, and also the connection with the director Alan Parker.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate and share with us some of your early acting experiences working on the stage, and some of the most memorable shows and people you worked alongside during that sort of early period?
Yes. I'm just trying to think, actually. Well, I think my first sort of experiences of acting on stage were in rep. So they weren't particularly well known, but I had some fabulous experiences of doing some amazing productions, and I learned a lot. You learn a lot when you do theatre, and you experience a lot because there's an audience and you get a reaction, and then you know how to, you go back and you perfect it the next night. And there's nothing better than getting the feedback from an audience and finding out how to, you develop a character, and the character changes and your performance changes because you relax into it and you start building a character, and that's really interesting. I think I've done a lot of, you know, really good stuff working with some fantastic people. And I think also I've worked with John Schlesinger, for instance, and I did a really fantastic a documentary about mental health with him years ago, and that was just, and he was an incredible director. So yeah, I've worked with some really good people. I took a little diversion in the middle of my acting career, and I was picked up by Jack Good, who wanted me to do the Elvis show in the West End, because of my singing voice. Not particularly because of my dancing skills, because I'm not great at that, but I got by, and I ended up working with Shakin' Stevens and Alvin Stardust and Lulu, backing them and doing cameo roles within this production, and went on to do 18 episodes of a revival of a 50s show called Oh Boy. This was in the 80s. And that was fun. And I you know, and my love of music always inspires me. I feel so different when I'm around music.
Shortly, I wanted to come on to your love of music, and specifically jazz, and tap into some of your influences.
Yeah.
Before I do so, I still wanted to kind of stick on the early years and ask you about your memories of your mother working for the short-lived company Polytechnic Films, where she met a colleague and future husband, Gerry Anderson.
Yeah.
Can you discuss, Dee, their creative partnership and talk about your mother's important role in creating classic children's television, and a heavy involvement where she was making costumes, writing scripts, she was talent scouting, as well as voicing many of the characters?
Yeah. When you say talent scouting, she cast the voiceovers. You know, they had people like you know, she did do that, but they had people like Lois Maxwell, who was Miss Moneypenny in Bond, and so, you know, a lot of really good actors, Nicholas Parsons and Matt Zimmerman, you know, people like that who are very Shane Rimmer, American actors, and so she directed all that as well. I think with the costumes, she was good at costumes, but you know, like, people say that to me, but it's almost like that's a female job, they expect her to do that. What her credits have been erased over the years, which is I'm fighting at the moment, which I can't go into too much because of the legal aspect, but what I would say is, and you may have seen the sort of articles in the papers, and we've just done a Radio 4 program talking about it, but her credits have been erased over the years, and there's a lot of there are a lot of reasons why, which I can't discuss, but we're getting those back for her, because she actually was the creative force. Gerry had some creativity, and she always said to me that it was a very equal partnership in that way, but they also had a very good creative special effects team as well. But basically she did create all the characters, and we know that because I remember it, apart from anything else. And also Mary Turner, for instance, who sculpted the puppets. We have that on film of how that happened, with my mother overseeing the whole procedure. So it's, you know, it's something that our house was full of creativity, and I was always writing poems and being encouraged by my mother, actually saying to me that, you know, you're really good at this, you can do anything you like. It was a great kind of experience. And my grandparents, who I stayed with a lot, always had a piano, and we always sang around the piano. So my influences from, you asked me about the influences in jazz. Yeah, I mean, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, actually in recent years, Amy Winehouse, I love her. And there, Cleo Lane. They had all the vinyls, the old vinyls as well. And so I learnt those and got a feel for it, really. And I suppose that's where, when I'm singing, I come to life and feel, this is where I should be.
I wanted to ask you, Dee, about your personal relationship with Gerry, and did you always recognise him as a father figure? And of the programmes, the classic children's programmes they produce together, do you have any favourites, and if so, why?
Gerry was my father. I mean, he brought me up. My real father was in the States, so I didn't see him that much, but he was lovely, but he had his own family after my mother and he split up. So Gerry brought me up, and they were together all my my childhood life, really. My favorite, I suppose, is I did like Stingray, but I think Thunderbirds, of course, and I love Lady Penelope. And I actually did the voice of Lady Penelope for a Halifax commercial a couple of years ago.
I must admit, of all the shows they produced, I had a particular fondness for Stingray. I thought Stingray was tremendous, and Marina, the Silent Mermaid, and I thought it was a magnificent.
I agree with you.
Program, yeah.
It was, wasn't it? It was so imaginative and creative, and I loved the idea of her not speaking. It was really interesting because it's all about. I think actually my mother was always ahead of her time with things, and I think also it was about sort of children's imagination and stretching the imagination for kids, so that you didn't have to actually express yourself in a sort of a conventional way. And puppets were made of wood, but they still thought they were real people.
Can we come on to some of your TV credits, because you've appeared in several high-profile television serials over the years, including, we can name many: The Bill, London's Burning, Midsomer Murders, The Woman in White, and many more. Of your film and television acting credits, which performances and productions are you most proud of, and why?
I liked The Woman in White with Jenny. I played opposite Jenny Seagrove. I played a nasty nurse, a rather evil nurse, and I quite enjoyed doing that. It was like a bit of a character role for me, and not the sort of fluffy blonde roles that I was always cast in. And then in London's Burning, I enjoyed playing. There was a really good part of it, and this was in the 90s, the early 90s, and when autism was just beginning to be recognized and to be, for people to know what it was. And I played the mother of an autistic boy who got obsessed with the firefighters, and then, but he actually got stuck in a house and got killed. And that was like, I remember getting very upset about that, genuinely thinking that could happen to somebody, And I think that was I think London's Burning, I think it was a really good, there were some good storylines, as were in The Bill. And I was in The Bill a couple of times, playing sort of, not enormous roles, but significant roles. I think the play for today that I did opposite Ken MacDonald, who was in Only Fools and Horses, he was the barman. That was one of my sort of scariest but most rewarding roles. And we started at Sheffield Crucible. It was a Peter Tinniswood play, and we toured it for 6 months, and it was more or less him and me on stage for about an hour and a half. terrifying. And I remember the first night and me thinking, I'm never going to remember all the lines, you know, and phoning a friend and saying, I don't think I could do this. But actually, as soon as you get on the stage, the nerves just go. And then BBC Two took it up as a play for today. This was in the 80s, the late 80s, I think, or mid 80s. And play for today, they did it as a very fabulous play for today. So that was brilliant. And it taught me a lot schlepping around the country, because it was, you know, it was such a gritty part. I played like the person who supports, like a Rob Wilton. He was like a comedian and I was his sort of fall guy. And it was, you know, it was, and I did it, you know, I did impersonations myself and sang and took some of my clothes off, not all, but it was very interesting actually. And it was a fun kind of thing to do as well. But I learned a hell of a lot doing that role.
Dee, I want to move to feature film, and I want to pick up on a film that came out, it was released in 1985, a horror called Murder Elite, which I'm desperate to see this film, where you appeared with actress Ali MacGraw. What are your
and Billy Whitelaw. Well, I actually didn't do a scene with them, although I have met them anyway, because I was the person who was murdered sort of in the first 5 minutes. So, but I am on the cover of the thing. But it was a night shoot at Pinewood, and the director said to me, I think you should do this. And it was like, because I do hysterics very, very well. I did, because I remember doing that in the Crucible at Nottingham Playhouse, going completely mad. And so, I was killed, but it was fun. And it was a big role, actually. And it's still going. I think those films, you know, they kind of go onto video and stuff.
We've already spoken about music, and you've touched very briefly on some of your influences, particularly in jazz. But I want to find out specifically where this love of music comes from, and what age did you start performing? And did you come from a musical family? And can you just talk about some of your musical discoveries at a young age, and when you started to sing and play instruments? Well,
my grandparents were the ones with the piano. My mother always had a piano as well, actually, in the house. But they played piano probably every day, and they also encouraged me to sing. Now the thing is, it's you know, this was way before Simon Cowell or anything like that. But my grandfather used to say to me, you know, we'd go on holiday. He was a racing fanatic, horse racing. So we used to go to Great Yarmouth in September every year for the horses. So afterwards, we'd walk along the promenade, and there would always be competitions. And there was one competition called Uncle Neville, and he would always enter me for this competition, and I would always win, singing. Mainly "Oh Mr. Porter" or something that would appeal to the audience. And then one year, actually, I sang something else, and I came second. And I thought, second, that's no good. But anyway, I was like, really, you know, they really encouraged me to sing, and I did actually sing in bands when I was about 15. I mean, I really always loved music, any sort of music, and I think the influences from their point of view, you know, and I loved the big show music as well, like The Sound of Music and South Pacific, and because they'd have all those vinyls, and so would my mother. My mother also loved Frank Sinatra, and I really got into his stuff as well. So there's lots of different influences. So my dog has decided to choose something.
From influences to performance.
Mm-hmm.
Where have you performed, and can you discuss the musicians you work with and the material you perform at the moment?
Mhm.
And also, what was it like releasing your own album called Love in a Dark Place?
Oh yeah, that was brilliant. And I recorded at the Premises in Hackney, which is a stunningly creative place. And I just love it. It just sort of smells of creativity and music and, performance. It's got, everyone goes there, and, all the greats have recorded there and rehearsed there. And it's just amazing. And I love doing that. And I love doing the album. And then I released it, and it got very good reviews in all the national papers. I've done a lot of my own stuff. I've written songs, and I've actually, in more recent years, I've been writing my own songs, but they're on that album, a lot of them. And yeah, so I'm doing that more now, and I've started again, having been mentored by David Grant and Cary Grant. They've encouraged me to get out there and to have a plan of action for the next 5 years, and culminating in very big venues. So this is where I'm heading at the moment.
Is the plan at the moment to release more recordings, maybe a follow-up album? And is there a plan to, as you said, to perform more live dates? Is there kind of this? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've performed at the Pizza Expresses, the jazz venues, Jazz After Dark. I've just done quite a lot. And I don't know when this is going out, James, but the 31st of March, I've got a gig I'm doing an event in Gerrards Cross. Having said that, I think it's nearly sold out, so much to my surprise. But it's quite a small venue though. But I think there's a couple of tickets left.
I want to move on from music to some of your other endeavors and pursuits, which include your own online lifestyle magazine called Glotime TV, and YouTube chat show Wonderbirds with Debbie Arnold, Sherrie, Hewson, and Harriet Thorpe. Can you give us some background on these projects and share with us some of the people you've met, worked with, and interviewed through those opportunities?
God, yeah. I mean, Wonderbirds was like a conversation on the eve of lockdown, and it just took off. And we were on Sky News, like I think we released it on the Thursday. And by Saturday we were on Sky News, and then Sherrie was on Lorraine, and we were on Phil and Holly, and it suddenly became the sort of chat show online, and we've had 23 million views on it. We've had very big celebrities on there, from like people like Gokwan, Paul O'Grady, Brenda Blethyn, big names, and Sanjeev Bhaskar, who's unforgotten at the moment, and who is lovely. I mean, they're fabulous people, a lot of soap stars, and we're doing them twice a week. It's just an ongoing fabulous show. And we performed our own one-nighter at the Duchess Theatre last year, which was fantastic. And so, but we feel that the future's online, which is why we've stayed online, because we've been offered sort of terrestrial channels, but we've turned them down, because we feel that if we did that, it would we've decided to sort of stay on YouTube and Facebook. So it's because it's a slightly I mean, a lot of people watch it, but slightly more mature audience, it's like 40 plus really. But although kids do watch it as well, but yeah, we're having fun with it still. And we have different presenters as well. Like we had Debbie McGee on, and Natalie Ogle, Linda Lusardi. Well, they sort of, when one of us can't do it, somebody else sits in. But we have a lot of fun and a great chat, which we share with the audience.
I want to pick up on interviewing, because you can learn a lot about people and their lives through research and talking to them about different aspects of their life and their career and so forth. And obviously there's different ways of interviewing people. How would you sum up your style on the show in terms of your interviewing, the research involved, and the information and stories you get from your guests?
Well, what you said is right, research. And I think the key to it is to find out something about them that perhaps isn't obvious. So, for instance, Denise Welch was on, and I thought, everyone's going to talk to her about, loose women or what she did, on Piers Morgan or whatever. But this one was like, I suddenly spotted, I was scrolling through, Googling her and looking at Wikipedia. Then I suddenly found that she had a photograph of herself in a bikini. And I thought, aha, I'm going to ask her about that because she looked fantastic. And I remember saying to her, Denise, I've just found a picture of you in a bikini. I said, you look amazing. And she went, yeah. And everyone says, because I'm over 60, I shouldn't be wearing, and it led to a great conversation about women having the freedom to wear what they want at whatever age. So, you know what I mean? I think the key to it is to get the best out of people by not actually, getting on something that then they don't want to talk about, but something that they're interested in that's a little bit outside the box,
You're co-presenting with your friends. They're also actresses as well.
Yeah.
I was interested to find out, do you have a behind the scenes team as well that are involved in the
Yes.
editing the program, promoting it and so on? Or is it just you as presenters and also involved in the research and the questions and so on?
Yeah, we have a really, really good team. We have amazing people. We have Has is our main editor, director, and he records us. We record on a Monday morning for the two shows. We've just recently got Angie Greaves to do some content for us, and a lot of really good people are coming on. We've got Sam Brown, I think, next week, and if you remember Sam, she was
Joe Brown's daughter.
So I love that song. I loved her, and can't wait to meet her actually. Yeah, we have a guy called Thomas Abbott and a lady called Talia who do our social media, and we have a lot of people in the background doing stuff for us.
It's interesting that you've mentioned that you've had an opportunity to be commissioned and broadcast on a channel which you turned down, and you say that you wanted it to be exclusively online at the moment.
Yes.
Why did you decide to make that decision?
Because the future's online. If you think about Netflix and Amazon Prime and ITVX, everyone, all the big channels are going digital, because a lot of people aren't watching their television or Sky or anything like that anymore. And it's like, I think we have to be ahead of ourselves. We have to be ahead of the trend. So I have to say that the stations we were offered were local stations. I mean, maybe if ITV or Channel 5 offered it to us, we'd have to kind of think about it. But I think we're excelling, we're growing, we're in a big growth period at the moment, and so we're expanding all the time. And I think we've been very successful because we've had great people on, and also we've kept it very non-political, but we've kept it fun, but we do answer people's questions. So we've got a lot of loyal followers who stayed with us throughout from the pandemic when they were at home, but they engage with us all the time as well.
I want to steer away from the success of Wonderbirds and now come back to your mother, who we've spoken about at some length during our conversation, and cast the clock back now to 2016 when she passed away.
Mm-hmm.
What are your memories of your mother as a creative woman, as a business person, and her overall contribution to the TV industry? And you've mentioned earlier on, can you also share your frustration and battle with ITV, who you feel have failed to recognise your mother's important role as a co-creator on Thunderbirds?
Yes, we're in discussions at the moment, so I can't really talk about that. But what I can say is that she was always incredibly intelligent, incredibly creative, and she has had her reputation and credits diminished over the years because, unfortunately, she had a very bad divorce from my stepfather, who decided that he wanted nothing to do with her and wanted her to be cut out of everything. And so ITV, unfortunately, the corporation backed him up. So because there's many, in a divorce, there's many disgruntled partner, but from her point of view, they took his side, not hers, because it was the old boys network. I'm not saying any more than that at the moment.
Dee, I want to come on to your hobbies and interests outside of your work,
Mm-hmm.
and ask you what are the things you're interested in away from all your creative endeavors. And I also wanted to ask you, are there any creative avenues you haven't explored that you would like to?
Well, I have to say that creatively, I could, if you'd asked me that a few years ago, I'd have said painting, because when I was at school, I went to a convent, actually, believe it or not, and the art teacher I had the same art teacher throughout the whole time I was there, from 5 until I was 18. And she never put my painting on the wall, which is like the bane of my life. It was something that used to really upset me because I loved painting. But for some reason, she didn't like anything I did. I think I was a bit too kind of abstract or wacky, or, you know what I mean? She was very conventional. Traditional. So, but then I was talking to somebody who was an artist, and he said to me, you're so creative. I think you don't realize you can paint. And I said, no, that's one thing I can't do. I never had anything put on the wall, and I love it. But he said, it doesn't matter if you're not good, but you should do it. So he spent a day with me doing an oil painting, and it was 3 boats. It was like on the sea, and I had it framed, and it's bloody amazing, actually. But I felt I didn't do it. I felt he'd done it, because he was saying put a blob there and a bit of white there for the sail. And but I haven't stopped painting ever since. And I've just been commissioned by June Field. She saw one of my paintings and she said, "Oh, I'd love that." She said, "I want that. I want one like that." And I said, "Well, I'll do one for you, actually." So she said, "I'll commission you." It's my first commission. So I'm really excited. I'll give you a shot of it to put in the show.
Yeah, that'd be great. Be interested to see your artwork. Finally, we move on shortly to the final questions that we ask all Your Take guests.
Yeah.
But before we do so, my final question, I wanted to ask you, Dee, do you have a family? And if so, what are their impressions of your life story, your career, and all the things you've achieved to date?
I've got a daughter who's 35, and I've got 3 grandchildren. I've got my granddaughter is nearly 12. I've got twin grandsons of 7, nearly. They're all their birthdays are next month, so they're 7, and then my granddaughter's 12 next month. And they think that I'm completely nuts, and I don't know what they think about a career, but they go, oh my goodness. They just are a bit amazed by me, I think, all the time. And but one of the twins has picked up on the creativity big time, and he draws characters that a 25 or 30-year-old couldn't do. He's got a gift, and I spend a lot of time with him creating. In fact, every time I babysit, we do this thing where I get them both to do, but he's got the talent of that. My other grandson is very good at sport, but Finley has got this sort of gift, and so we create characters together, and
So
we're creating actually an animated series, which over time it'd probably take a few years, but we're building up characters. So that's an interesting pursuit for me to see how that's going to pan out.
the creative family bug continues.
Yeah, absolutely. And my cousin is a writer. Amazing. I mean, she's on my mother's side, and she looks like my mother. She's been on our show, actually, and she's written 3 books in lockdown. She had a baby, and then she was breastfeeding in the night, couldn't sleep, so she decided to write a book. So she's written 3 books, and she's now got them all published, and she's running a book club. So yeah, the creative gene continues.
And what's her name?
Francesca Catlow. I'd love you to interview her.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Yeah, I would love to.
Mm-hmm.
Dee, we move on to that time. We ask all your take guests these same quickfire questions to find out things we've not established over the course of the last 60 minutes, find out things we might not know about them, things they like, maybe things they don't like. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, go for it.
Dee Anderson, here's the first one. What would you say, number 1, is your favourite pastime?
My favourite pastime is painting, actually. I mean, I say singing, but I feel that singing is more of my career now. So painting, because I'm not particularly good at it, but I love it.
Interestingly, you've mentioned this love of painting. Is there any particular artist that inspire you, or you love their work?
Clay, I like, and Picasso. I like, actually, Monet I do like, but Monet and I think actually Van Gogh is interesting to me, because he was completely mad and cut his ear off. And also the fact that he only had 2 paintings, sold 2 paintings in his lifetime. I think that's, a lot of artists really didn't do anything until they died. But yeah, that Clay was interesting. And I love the colours.
From some of your art influences, and you mentioned Monet,
Mm-hmm.
Van Gogh, we move to movies now. But Dee, what would you cite as your favourite film and why?
My favourite film, oh my God. I love Gone with the Wind. And I know, I love old movies as well as new ones. But yeah, Gone with the Wind is amazing film. And I love the whole sort of intrigue around the casting of that. And how I mean, I loved the whole thing about how Vivian Leigh stood on the, she knew she wanted this part so badly. So she actually wore like a cape with a hood, and came up to the director at night and said, I am your Scarlett O'Hara. I love that story. It was also romantic and wonderful. So yeah, I suppose that's my favorite film, and I could watch it over and over again. And I loved, Rhett Butler and the whole sort of intrigue at that time. And of course, it's where I came from, Mississippi.
I'm
in the South.
a huge movie fan, and I confess to seeing most of the classics, but I feel ashamed to say that I've never ever sat through or seen Gone with the Wind.
You
Never.
have to. James, this is your mission. This is your task. I'm setting now for you. You've got to see it.
I need to see it. Clark Gable, but it's very
Yeah.
best.
Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful. It's beautifully done, beautifully filmed as
And
well.
Best motion picture winner. We moved from Gone with the Wind, a classic, you could say, Hollywood masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
We now move on to novelists. Dee Anderson, who would you choose as your favourite novelist?
Jane Austen. Let me see. Yeah, I think Dickens too. David Copperfield was the first grown-up book that I read. The Diary of Anne Frank was my first teenage book, and that was, to me, so moving and amazing and incredible. And I loved the way she said that even though she was, trapped in this building, and when she was 13, and how she said that all people actually are all good. I remember that really, I think that was a big influence in my life, actually.
Some classic choices there with Jane Austen.
Yeah.
And of course, Dickens as well. Two very good choices.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the powerful Anne Frank's Diary.
Mm-hmm.
Dee, we've established you've done many different things. You've been an actress on stage, radio, TV. You've been a presenter, an interviewer, as well as your love of music and performing.
Yeah.
But if you had to choose a different profession, what would you have chosen?
It's a difficult one. I was thinking the other day, actually, I think maybe my grandmother used to say I'd make a good lawyer, because I was quite good at sniffing things out, and also I think I'm quite a good person to I think I read people quite well. I suppose that comes from, studying so many different characters. Yeah, maybe law I could have gone into. I think I'd found that really interesting.
From the legal profession now to greatest inspirations, but who would you say has been the greatest inspiration in your life?
Do you mean as a real person, or
yeah,
imaginary person, like a sort of an icon? You mean?
It's interesting you mention that, because all the guests I've asked this question to have always chosen a real life person that tends to always be a family figure or figurehead. But it's interesting that you've said about maybe an imaginary person, or maybe somebody who's famous in film or television, or an author. Yeah, but who would you cite as your influences then? Or greatest inspirations?
My mother was really good at giving me confidence to do what I wanted, and my grandfather, strangely, he was a boxer, so from a very misogynist sort of background, but he used to say to me, doesn't matter that you're female, you can do anything you want, anything a bloke can do, you can do. And that to me was I've carried through my life. So I've never really thought about, like some women go, oh, it's been really tough, and because it's a man's world. I've never thought that. I've always thought to myself, I mean, I do feel sad that there are so many women who leave mid-career, because because of the boardroom is male dominated, and stuff like that. But I also feel that I'm very fortunate to be from a background where women were told that we could achieve what we wanted, and we weren't conventional. We weren't conventional. We weren't told that we had to stay at home with the kids. That was never a thing. So I think, from that point of view, I think I've got that strength from them.
From inspirations now to newspapers. Dee, do you read a newspaper? And if so, which one?
I read all of them, actually. I suppose The Guardian is the one that I listen to the most, if you know what I mean. And I suppose, and although the Daily Mail is, is really kind of a terrible paper, actually. I have to say that sometimes I find the headlines quite amusing. So I kind of, if they come up on my screen, I think, oh, and then I think, oh, it's the Daily Mail. But it's, pastime, reading that. But yeah, the Guardian is to me the best paper, because it has got the most, depth to it, and serious. And I believe what they say, that the ethics are good. The ethos of the Guardian is better than the Sun, if you like.
It's interesting you say about the Daily Mail, because despite what our opinions might be, it's the best-selling British newspaper.
It is. Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. It's an easy read, isn't it? And they have a very good supplement on a Saturday. I quite enjoy that, actually. When I see it in the hairdressers, and I enjoy reading that.
I try not to read it, to be honest, but I don't want to get myself into trouble.
I know.
From newspapers now to cuisine, what would you say is your favourite food?
Oh, Thai food. Thai. I love it. There's a really nice restaurant near me, actually, that I go to. But yes, that's my absolute favourite. And I do like a roast on a Sunday. So I like, with real roast potatoes and beautiful vegetables. And we usually have that at my daughter's, actually. I'm really good at cooking that now. And we usually have a really good dessert as well. So that I think it's great to have a family meal on a Sunday where you can sit and talk about stuff, because a lot of that's gone now.
It's giving me a Sunday craving now. We ask all our guests to choose a favourite cultural icon, which is a tricky one. It could be somebody from history, a religious leader,
yeah,
a political figure, maybe somebody who's changed the way we live and shaped it in some sort of way. Who would you choose as your favourite cultural icon?
Cultural icon. God, there are so many. I feel that it's very difficult, actually. I think Queen Victoria was amazing. I think, and Albert, particularly Albert, because I think he did a lot of really good stuff here, and changed a lot of stuff about the national health, etc. I think obviously Marie Curie, I think she was incredible. And of course, she, this was the sort of first kind of advances towards curing cancer. And of course, I think the first men in space, I met Bud Aldrin, who was, I thought, my God, I've been watching him on telly for so long. But I think there are so many. And I think there's not one particular one I would say, because they're all so amazing. But there are also a lot of females who, again, have been overlooked. And also people of colour, like the women, who broke the code. And I think, and a lot of them were doing stuff actually at NASA as well. And there was a movie made about them. So people like that, I think we should embrace much more.
Some interesting choices there. From cultural icons now to something completely different. Dee, what is your favourite curse word and why?
Favourite curse word?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I do swear, actually. It kind of makes me feel better sometimes. And there are certain people you can't swear with. But, well, the F word, I do that sometimes. I'm not so keen on the C word, because I mean, that is a bit sort of derogatory. But why not, really? And what does it mean at the end of the day?
The F word seems to be the most popular choice among our guests so far, so we'll accept that one. Favorite places or holiday destinations next?
Right. favorite places. I love Cannes. I like the south of France. I also like I like the States for a holiday, and I love Memphis. I was born just outside Memphis. I love Memphis because it's got Beale Street, where all the singers and the musicians are, and you can just spend days there, actually days, listening to the music and getting up and singing, and that is incredible. I also like Paris, and I like Scotland.
I share your sentiment for Memphis. I went about 15 years ago. I visited Nashville first and then Memphis. And I would say Nashville is probably a nicer place in some ways, but I like Memphis more. I'm more orientated to the blues than country music.
Yeah.
And I kind of like the rawness of it. And I found it such a friendly place, very warm. Everybody, as soon as they know you're English, they instantly want to talk to you. And I loved it because it's steeped in its rich music history with the blues, Elvis Presley, 50s rock and roll. It's like being in a pilgrimage.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Did you go to Elvis's house, Graceland?
I did, yeah. And I found that I'd been brought up on rock and roll because my dad was a huge rock and roll fan, and I'd seen a lot of the rock and rollers when I was young, at about 10, 11.
Wow. Who did you see?
I saw, well, my dad was friendly with Dwayne Eddy. That was his boyhood hero. And
oh my God.
He became friends with him. And when Dwayne lived in London in the late 60s, they would meet up. But at a young age, I saw the Everly Brothers. I saw Chuck Berry, Little Richard, all these Carl Perkins, and then some 50s artists who never became necessarily big, but they had a couple of hit records. Charlie Gracie, who I got to know, who had a #1. So yeah, I'm kind of a lot of musical influence there.
Oh my God,
yeah.
yes. Oh my God, fantastic. I love the 50s and 60s music.
And I found, for me, even though I've been brought up on Elvis, but my heroes in rock and roll were more Eddie Cochran and Chuck Berry, but I had such an appreciation for Elvis. But yeah. I found the whole experience quite emotional.
Oh, what, in Memphis, you mean?
Graceland, because you walk around this house and this man, what he did was incredible. His achievements in music, selling all those amounts of records, his popularity, all the gold discs he was awarded, the shows he played, the Ed Sullivan Show and so on, all that history, and then dead and gone. He had all of it and had nothing in the end, and it just seemed to me so tragic.
That's what's so sad, isn't it? It's very hard, I suppose, for somebody to deal with that sort of fame and fortune, you know?
And I think it would have been interesting if Elvis had lived, and maybe if Colonel Tom Parker had come out of the picture as his manager. It would have been interesting to see how his career would have gone on. You know, would he have changed in any way? Like Johnny Cash, for example, he changed as an artist and became more of a kind of solo acoustic and stripped back performer. It would have been interesting to see maybe Elvis would have written more of his own songs. And we'll never find that out, which is
no, because Colonel Parker wasn't he sort of had some sort of he couldn't leave the country, could he?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
he didn't have a passport, I think.
We move from holiday destinations now back to music.
Yeah,
obviously we digress slightly, talking about some of our heroes and musical memories, but who would you say is your favorite music artist, and what would you say, Dee, is your favorite album?
My favorite album, that's a tricky one, actually. I've got several. I don't think I've got one particular because as I said before, it's got to be Billie Holiday. And I love that Strange Fruit that she wrote. Do you know that song?
No, I don't know that at all.
Strange Fruit was a song that she wrote about people of colour who were hanging from trees in the South. And that is the only thing I would say about the South, not Memphis, but the other parts of the South that I don't like, is that they still have a lot of the older people are still very racist. And that is quite upsetting when you go into the countryside, because I toured around meeting a lot of my relatives about 20 years ago with my daughter, who was 11 or 12 at the time. And a lot of, it's very weird. It's almost like they haven't, I don't think they signed the treaty in the Civil War. You know what I mean? I think they still think that they can do what they like. And I found that quite upsetting. And I think that at the end of the day, what was I talking? Sorry, I've lost my thread now. What was I talking about?
Yeah, you were talking about Billie Holiday and that particular song.
Strange Fruit. So Strange Fruit was where the people were hanging from trees, which is why she called it Strange Fruit. And this is what they used to do. This was after the slave trade had finished, but they would actually hang black people. And but it's a beautiful song, Also, I've talked about Amy Winehouse. I just thought she was a real talent. And I've just sang in a place where she started, actually, called Jazz After Dark, a few times. A very gritty jazz venue in central London, in Soho. And I loved her Back to Black album. Loved that. And I also like, I liked Ella Fitzgerald. And there are so many people I love. I could listen to music all the time. Fleetwood Mac I loved. And some of the heavy rock albums I like, as well as the sort of, the slightly new kind of singer-songwriter type songs, like Ed Sheeran. I think it's brilliant.
I agree with you on Amy Winehouse. I think she was a great talent and such a sad loss at such a young age. A tragic.
Her mum Janice came to see me in at the Pizza Express about 3 or 4 years ago. She's got MS, unfortunately, in a wheelchair. But I said to her, "How can you ever recover from losing a child, especially, darling Amy?" And she said, "I know." But she was delightful. And she said to me, "Oh, it was so brilliant seeing you." And she said, "As long as you're enjoying it, that's the main thing. As long as you're happy." And I thought, what a great mum she would have been to Amy,
We come on next, Dee, to greatest achievements to date. What would you say is yours?
Mine is giving birth to my daughter, who is absolutely delightful, and is also very creative and talented. She's a mum now, and but she does all sorts of stuff. She loves cooking, and she actually the creativity in the house again is extraordinary. And her dad was a theatre director. He's still alive, actually, but he lives in Whitstable.
And then finally, Dee Anderson, the last question. How do you wish to be remembered?
As a kind, creative, talented person.
I think that's a nice way to end this evening's interview. Thank you kindly for taking 60 minutes out of your evening to talk about your life and the many different areas you've worked in, and talking about creativity, your mum, of course,
Mhm.
her influence, and the music. To hear about the music's been interesting as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Interesting to find out where that path leads with the music, a follow-up album,
Hmm.
more gigs and so on, and obviously being mentored as well.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Where can we find out more and listen to your music? And also, if people haven't tuned into the Wonderbirds and want to see some of these interviews, where do they need to go?
Okay, so we're on YouTube, Wonderbird Show, and also Facebook, Wonderbird Show. But there's a website, amazingwonderbirds.com. And my music is deeandersonmusic.co.uk.
Dee Anderson, thank you kindly for being a guest on Your Take and joining
Pleasure.
me this evening.
Thank you, James, for asking me. And thank you. It's been fabulous talking to you.